Welcome to Sephardic U Presents, where tradition, heritage, and culture come alive. I'm Nathaniel Pool, joined by my co-host Sam Bendayan, and today we're exploring one of the most joyous and meaningful celebrations on the Jewish calendar, Purim.
That's right, and today's episode is extra special because we're joined by Deanna Pool, whose family has an incredible 2,000-year history in Morocco. Deanna will share personal stories and memories of Moroccan Purim traditions, offering a unique perspective on how this holiday was celebrated with reverence, community, and deep spirituality.
But before we dive into Deanna's stories, let's reflect briefly on the history of Purim and why it holds such significance in Jewish life. First, Purim commemorates the miraculous salvation of our people, the Jewish people, from destruction at the hands of Haman, and as it's told in the book of Esther, the Megillat Esther. Set in ancient Persia, the story follows Queen Esther and her cousin Mordecai, who bravely intercede to save their people from annihilation. Purim's marked by the reading of the Megillah, the exchanging of food gifts, mishloach manot, and giving charity, matanot le'avyonim, and the festive meal, so that Purim, and of course, rejoicing. But while Purim celebrations share those central themes, how the holiday is observed differs significantly across Jewish communities worldwide. Some emphasize costumes and festivities and drinking, while others highlight spirituality and reverence. And that brings us to our conversation today, exploring how Moroccan Jews infuse Purim with deep spiritual meaning and community focus. So, Dina, we're thrilled to have you here with us today. Let's start by talking about the overall atmosphere of Purim in Morocco.
So, the first question I've got here is, how does the Moroccan approach to Purim differ from places where drinking and excessive partying are part of the celebration?
Purim celebration was a joyful one, with emphasis on the children. Young ones were taught songs, others from the age of 6 to 8, dressed in royal robes, performed plays in Hebrew, assuming the roles of Ahasuerus, Haman, and Esther. More elaborate plays, with a larger cast of characters, were performed by teenagers in Hebrew or French. I still remember some passages of the Megillah sung or declaimed in Arabic for the benefit of the Jewish women who were not schooled in Hebrew.
That's amazing.
Keenly aware of the sanctity of the synagogue, the house of God, the congregants behaved in a most reverential fashion. Food nor drinks were ever seen, nor were babies in swaddles ever brought to the synagogue. Knowing before whom we stood, as often spelled over the Holy Ark, we behaved accordingly. The drinking I saw in the USA was pure anathema to me. Adults dressed in costumes were an unknown tradition that ran contrary to the respect and reverence we were inculcated to show our elders. How do you look up to them then?
You're right. What the no drinking? What do you think that stemmed from, or has it always been that way?
Drinking was really reserved to the Kiddushim, therefore it was inveigled with sanctity. And perhaps because we lived in an Arab country where wine is forbidden, out of reverence for our host nation, drunkenness was never seen. or very rarely seen.
It makes sense. Well, let's talk about the traditional foods. Purim meals are such an important part of the celebration. I mean, we're one of the requirements is to have Sedat Purim. What dishes were significant to the holiday in Morocco with your family and community?
After the fast of Purim, a traditional meal was served that consisted of fish cooked in tomato sauce. There was eggplant, chicken in parsley sauce, and sweets specific to the holidays, most especially the Fejouela, a fried confection made to look like a scroll. There were sesame seed cookies. There were cigars stuffed with nuts and covered with honey, and a special bread called the Boyosa, which was round with crimped edges in which were inserted eggs, symbolic of the eyes of Haman to be gouged.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That's
That's interesting.
I grew up with that too, with the boyosa, the round circular bread, the Arab bread that was clipped with scissors all the way around to make a pretty decoration, and in the middle were the two whole eggs in the shell inserted, so the whole thing looked like a face. And we looked forward as kids to taking a spoon and gouging out those eyes, and so that was one of them. We loved, sliced it up with butter and cheese. The other was the Fejouela, which is a fried pastry that my mom would roll out very thin, cut into strips, and then in a cast iron frying pan, she'd dip them in for just a few seconds till they crisp, while turning them with a fork to create that scroll. Once they were done, they got dipped in a honey lemon type of liquid, warm liquid, and then cooled off. It was an amazing treat.
Okay, now I'm hungry.
I don't blame you. Sam, you had mentioned something to me offline about something in Spain that you'd known the same or similar type of
Yeah,
bread
it's
or similar name.
yeah, when I was a kid, and this had nothing to do with Jewish culture in Spain. It was just in general culture. There was a round sweet bread, which they called a bollo, and they would sell these in like pastry shops all over the place. And it was like a round bread, but it was baked with sugar, so it was like a sweet treat. So I'm wondering, since Spain being so close to Morocco, I'm wondering if this boyosa has they have maybe kind of like a similar background.
Yeah.
Could very well
But,
be.
but the boyosa was not sweet, was it? It was just like a plain bread.
Correct.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Wow.
Well, what'd you drink with it? Was there a drink?
Yes.
Oh, you mean the boy? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm talking to Deanna.
Minty sweetened with beet sugar and served in elaborate glasses from a silver teapot completed the festive meal. As usual, we held open doors, literally and figuratively.
I think every Moroccan family has a set of those tea glasses.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so open doors, meaning the house was, the doors would remain open, people would come in and out like pretty much the whole day. So
Absolutely. They were literally opened.
okay, wow.
It seems like every Moroccan holiday, Jewish holidays that way. Passover's Mimuna, all of them. The one we just talked about, Shavuot.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I guess one thing to mention here is that it was predominantly an urban environment. Right, it wasn't like a big suburban environment with big houses and lots of land. It was apartments, and so people
Correct.
live very close to each other. And so yeah, when you open the door, it's very there's a lot of significance, right? You're opening it to everybody who's outside, and people are walking in and out. So it's a very
Correct.
close knit community kind of
That's a
environment.
great point.
Yeah.
Correct.
So let's move on to the Megillah reading. So, how was the Megillah reading observed in Morocco, and what spiritual significance did it hold?
Megillah reading in Morocco was a men's affair. Most
Hmm.
read from their own handmade Megillot, which were written on parchment, delicately adorned according to one's taste and, I suppose, money. My
Right.
father's scroll came from his paternal grandfather, Baba Masoud Ammar. It may be between 150 to 175 years old.
Wow. So did every family have their own Megillah, or is this how it was?
Yes, as far as my family is concerned, every family had their own Megillah.
Wow, very interesting.
I see that too a lot at our Sephardic synagogue here in the U.S.
Yeah, a lot of them they'll come into the reading with their own Megillah. It's kind of like it looks kind of like a status symbol, right? It's like you
Oh,
come in,
for
oh, I have
sure,
a
for
Megillah,
sure.
and look how nice mine is, you know.
You know,
Yes,
was there a
interesting.
lot of noise and screaming?
No, not at all. Silence was only interrupted by the pronunciations of the name of Mordechai, Esther, and Haman. Mordechai's name was greeted with a thrice repeated Baruch Mordechai, Esther Berucha Esther, and Haman Arur Haman, in accordance with Talmud Megillah.
I've heard that Arur Haman, Arur Haman, Arur
Right,
Haman.
we do still have that, right? And in the Megillah, but I guess so. The celebrations we see in other places where children have the toys and the groggers and everybody screams when
No,
Haman's name is said. This is not part of the
no,
celebration. Wow,
not at,
very interesting.
because it is said that you are supposed to hear every word of the Megillah.
Right.
Therefore, we were really attentive, and the Megillah was read to the women at home out of diffidence for their family's obligations. They knew they could not come early in the morning or late in the evening, so therefore it was read at home for the women.
Uh, so
That's
the, so the,
awesome.
so the Megillah was read twice. Is that correct? Was read
Yes,
once on Erev Purim, right?
yes,
The night before Purim, and then once during the day, like in the middle of the day when the
right.
okay.
I've seen that done here too. That's
Yes,
I
yes.
love that. Let's talk about charity and community support. It always seems to be a subject with the Moroccans. So Purim is also known for its emphasis on charity. I'd like to hear how your family and community embodied this value during the holiday in Morocco.
On Purim days, trays of pastries were sent to family, relatives, neighbors, and all homebound. At my home, a stream of people, invited and uninvited, kept my mother and the maids busy over the couscousier where homemade large grain couscous was steamed and served with milk and fresh butter brought by our Muslim neighbors and merchants. It was freshly churned, and they will come with big containers of butter for us.
Is that the couscous and milk called berkouks?
Correct. It is called berkouks.
Okay.
Wow,
And
and
it was
again,
it was the only dairy meal we had in the year. We had special bowls from which we ate the berkouks.
oh, so
Wow.
so speaking about dairy, then, so the tradition of eating dairy in Shavuot did not exist either. This was
No,
the only dairy meal of
that
the
is
whole year.
correct.
Wow, very interesting.
That is
And
correct.
and here the other thing that just to underscore what I said earlier, where the apartments and the doors open, even uninvited people could come in, right? It was just so,
Absolutely.
it was
It
so
was
open that, and it was considered, normal, and you don't need an invitation, all these formalities. You can just come in, right?
absolutely.
So
Well,
very
you
interesting.
know, a number of my like second and third cousins live in Montreal, and in kind of this same thing, they're in condos or apartments. They always live close to each other, family and community is a big thing. And if you've ever been there on a Shabbat or a holiday, and the doors seem to be open all the time, and the kids are coming in through and seeing each other and the cousins. But the other thing is the wafting smell through the hallway that is mouth watering.
That is so true.
Yeah. So, okay, let's shift over now to the role of women in the Moroccan Purim tradition. So, what role did women play in preparing and celebrating for Purim in your home?
Oh, that's a good question.
Our women delighted in being homemakers, celebrating the holidays with great anticipation and joy, and religiously observing their husbands' traditions. We didn't buy anything from the store. Everything was homemade to
Wow.
follow the tradition of the husband. Cooking and baking were a family affair, even involving children of every age. Elderly women shared stories of their youth or sang lullabies to children, to babies, lovingly cradled in their large aprons. I remember those aprons. Elderly men sang Piyutim or taught us Midrashim or elaborated on the significance of the holidays. They were the first one to taste the pastries as we awaited their verdict or approval by saying, "Blessed be the man that made such delights."
So, a couple of questions here. So, how long before Purim did the women start to prepare?
Really, we started on the eve of Purim because it was the Gemara to do every day Yom Yom. You have to prepare the food for the day. So it
Okay.
was, we will do that as we were fasting. We were doing all this baking and all this cooking.
It's so
Okay.
similar to us in the wilderness for 40 years with a manna. You only took your day's portion.
Right, the
That's
day's
right.
portion. And of course, nowadays we hear about, you should buy local food and it should be fresh and it shouldn't be processed. And if, processed food can last for a long time on the shelf because it's processed and has preservatives. So all of this was just handmade. So
Absolutely.
the other thing that struck me here is you mentioned babies in the aprons of the
Right.
mothers. So the mothers who had young babies, they would actually wrap them up in their aprons and they would carry them around all day, like tied in their aprons as they worked in the kitchen.
It
Is
was usually the young mother who just gave birth, brought the baby, and she knew that all the grandmothers, the elderly women, will take that baby. So that baby was passed from
wow.
hand to hand and slept comfortably against those women, while the younger women could help in baking. And it was also a relief for them not to have to take care of the baby.
Oh,
Or
wow.
if we had, for instance, we had maids from Senegal, they will have their babies or even our babies and on their back, and there was a big sheet that they will put the baby in, and they will tie the baby in the back and fold the sheet on their shoulders. And this is how the baby also was being taken care of.
What a
And
culture.
yes, and the
Yeah,
baby
it's
was Jewish or Muslim, it didn't make any difference. The baby was a baby.
Yeah, they're
the,
innocent.
the one time I went to Africa, I actually saw this on the street, women working on the street with the babies tied to their back with like a large sheet. So,
Correct.
and the other thing that strikes me here is when I had my first, my wife had our first child, one of the fashionable things to do was to buy this like sack that would go around your back so that the baby would be inside, close to your belly,
Mhm.
feeling all your movements and
Right.
listening to your heartbeat or whatever. And this was considered a very healthy thing. And so here we go. And, in Morocco, they were already doing this, the wisdom of all these generations and all the
Creates a
experience.
maternal bond.
Yeah, absolutely.
I must confess that I carried my son in the back on that big sheet as well, because he was heavy. So it was
Well,
easier for me to have him on my back.
Okay.
That's why I've been accused of being a mama's boy. So talking about the cultural significance, let's talk about Purim. It's a holiday that also represents strength and survival, the Jewish survival and resilience, you could say. How did these themes resonate in Morocco with your family?
In Parashat Beshalach it is written, the hand upon the throne of the Lord will have war with Amalek in every generation. Millennia after the threat of extinction faced by the Jews of Shushan, as related in Megillat Esther, the Moroccan Jewish community experienced firsthand similar circumstances when, during World War II, the Nazi Commission came to Morocco to fulfill the final solution, recounted my father.
The Nazis came to Morocco in
They
World
did.
War II?
They did. They came to Algeria, they were in Tunisia, they were in Libya. So, to their immense relief and eternal gratitude, the King of Morocco, Mohammed V, refused to hand over his Jewish subjects, prompting the Commission to remove the Nazi flag it has raised at City Hall and leave the country. In recognition of this miraculous feat, the Moroccan Prosper Hassin wrote a Megillah to commemorate the salvation of the Jews of Morocco in the 20th century. And his Megillah is in Yad Vashem.
In Israel.
In Israel, in Jerusalem. So
that's amazing.
The history of Jews being saved from extinction is ever present in our lives.
Wow, this is amazing. And just for a little historical background and context, at the height of their power, the Nazi Empire around 1943, they occupied all of North Africa. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, before that, they had taken over France, mm-hmm. and parts of North Africa were French protectorates. Morocco was one, Algiers was another, for instance. And so when France fell, Morocco was then, kind of already under the Vichy regime from France, which was the regime which collaborated with the Nazis. Once the Nazis took over France, they installed a puppet regime. And then that regime is the one you're talking about, who came down to Morocco with a Nazi flag and, sort of tried to push the Nazi ideology. This is just amazing that all events that happened. And of course, General Patton was the one who landed in Morocco, and that's where the liberation of North Africa began. His war, him and Montgomery fighting against General Erwin Rommel of the Nazis. And so it's amazing that the King of Morocco would stand up to such an immense military power, but he did. That's incredible.
Just like the King of Denmark, Christian the Ninth or the 10th, he just had to say no, and strangely, the might of the Nazi surrendered before the courage of those two men.
So Prosper Hassin's Megillah was really kind of a Moroccan Megillah, modern day.
Correct.
Right.
So it was not the story of Esther. It was the story of this whole of what we're talking about right now with the that's amazing. Wow, that's gotta be.
It is written in the same way, in the same language.
Amazing. You told us something earlier about another forgotten Purim Megillah, Moroccan Megillah, that you just learned about. Can you tell us about that?
King Sebastian of Portugal made a vow to the Catholic Church that he will do away with the Jews. So he warred against Morocco. He was defeated. And the Jews of Morocco wrote the Megillah Sebastian.
Wow.
In commemoration of this conquest and the victory of the Jews. It was in the 1500s.
So it's 16th century.
It's just really amazing how many times this has repeated itself in our history. This same episode of a sudden danger, sudden threat of annihilation, and then all of a sudden an unexpected miracle just kind of comes out seemingly from nowhere. Of course, we all know where it comes from, right? This is straight from Hashem, and he's always saving us throughout the ages. So anyway, Deanna, I want to thank you so much for sharing these incredible memories and stories. It's amazing to hear how these themes of faith, charity, reverence, and resilience run through both the ancient story of Purim and the experiences you lived with your family in Morocco.
Absolutely. I want to also thank you, Dina, for always bringing light and education and thought-provoking stories and history. Also want to thank all our listeners for joining us on this journey. And if you've enjoyed today's episode of Sephardic U Presents, don't forget to do what all the young guys say: subscribe, share, like, and leave us a comment. And you can find more about upcoming episodes at our website at sephardicu.com. Until then, I wish you Chag Sameach and Purim Sameach.